So it is May 15th, 1 p.m. EST. This is the Kubernetes Cloud Provider Working Group. I linked the agenda in the chat. So please put your name under the attendees list. So yeah, let's get started. So the agenda is pretty short. I don't think meeting's going to be that long. So the first thing on the list is end-to-end test. Last week I had a chance to talk to Ben the Elder from Google about how we can kind of push the test grid effort a bit forward. And pretty much the biggest blocker, it seems, is that test grid only supports pulling end-to-end test results out of a GCS bucket, which I'm sure is going to be a problem for a lot of providers, since not everyone, we can't really expect everyone to have and kind of maintain and pay for their own Google Cloud Storage bucket. We're going to try to work with Ben to see if we can update test grid or kind of the tools for test grid so that we can have any S3 compatible or any kind of object storage interface to use for test grid. But I imagine that's going to take some time to kind of.
That already worked. That doesn't already work?
No, I spoke with him last week. He said it doesn't work right now.
Okay, that's news. Thanks.
But I mean, in the meantime, there's nothing stopping people from still pushing for the end-to-end test. So I think we should promote providers to have end-to-end tests so that whenever the test grid setup gets working, they'll have all the JUnit files and results ready to push. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the state of end-to-end tests. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to support the S3 compatible buckets. And then for docs update, I think last week Chris kind of gave us an update on how we want to get started with this. So I think we reached consensus that what we want is a docs/getting started file for each provider. And then we're going to kind of put that in a pipeline to have the docs team have an automated way to generate docs for the website based on all the providers having that file exist. So I'm not sure, I'm sure that kind of effort is also going to take a while because first, I don't think all the providers have a repo yet. So Chris, do you have any updates on that? I'm guessing we should just push people to do it and hopefully just get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that just people submitting the work, it would be nice if when those patches come in, if we have a way to alert the group so that it can be a group review more than just outside of the SIGs. I think that could help with build some consistency and sharing across the documents. But I think just delivering on the content is the next step that we need to focus on.
Okay, cool. So if you are a maintainer or an owner of any provider code, then please start by creating a document called docs/gettingstarted.md.
Is this in the individual provider repos or? Okay.
Yes. On the individual provider repos in the Kubernetes org, and if you don't have a repo yet, it'll be on either your external Cloud Controller Manager repo or something else. Okay. So yeah, last thing that I had on the agenda was the SIG provider update. So I've made quite a few changes to the charter based on recommendations that Jace from Google had made. So the notable changes are specifying that each of the providers is going to fall as a sub-project under SIG provider and not a working group. And then kind of outlining more concretely what the processes for creating new sub-projects are and what that kind of looks like also for retiring sub-projects. And then it also kind of specifies what roles we're expecting. And most of it is just kind of copy-paste from some of the other charters that Jace recommended I look at. But these are just kind of the requirements that we need to fill out to kind of push for the SIG. So I recommend everyone just take a look at it. I really want to send an email out to the steering committee. So that's another thing Jace recommended to kind of get this process started. We should just send an email out to the steering committee and then go from there. So please take a look. And if there's no objections, I'm just going to send the email out probably tomorrow or Friday, the latest. Okay, so that's the agenda. So if anyone else, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Question about that. I know I think Nick had brought it up either last week or the week before, kind of about sub-projects of sub-projects, like
yeah.
SIG AWS meets pretty regularly, like every 2 weeks, and has pretty full meetings every 2 weeks. So I just kind of wondered what the status would be on that.
Yeah. So this is my personal take on this, and we may kind of refine it later. But my idea is that the AWS or kind of any provider sub-project of SIG provider is going to be pretty autonomous based on like when they have meetings, what technical details they talk about, and kind of technical decisions they make, as long as they're not doing something that would kind of affect the other providers in the project. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so, however long you guys want to have this up, like the meetings for the sub projects is up based on, how much content you have to cover every week and all that stuff.
Another question from my side, have the SIG AWS and SIG Azure leads made aware of this decision, and have they bought into the idea that there'll be a sub-project under a provider project? And the second question is, the steering committee is going to make the final decision on this, right? Am I getting that right?
Yes. From what I can tell, it will be the steering committee that makes any final calls for this. We did have, so during KubeCon, we did have a chance to talk to various technical leads from pretty much all the SIGs. And the general consensus seems to be that they're on board with this change. One thing we haven't done is actually go to all the SIG meetings and make, kind of big announcements telling everyone like, this is what we want to do yet. So I think we want to get approval from the steering committee about what the general direction is before we start, sending emails out to the individual SIGs and to Kubernetes dev and all that. But technical leads have kind of, it seems like most technical leads for those SIGs have approved of the change so far. Cool. So I think that's it for the agenda. So if anyone has questions or any issues they want to bring up.
I had one issue. I had one item I wanted to mention, and I should probably drop this into the agenda. Within upstream Kubernetes, there was deprecation code that was added. I think we talked a little bit about it last week. And then another patch came in where someone was deprecating their code, but they weren't moving it. They were actually they wanted it removed entirely. And so that patch has been updated to allow for either pointing to the new repository for deprecated providers or indicating that, some message that the code is unsupported and will be removed in the future. So just a quick update on that. I'll see if I can dig up the PR for it.
Yeah, it was actually Doug from VMware deprecating a cloud provider for a product that is no longer maintained.
Is that Fusion?
No, that was actually a product called Photon Controller.
Oh, right. Sorry, I got those mixed up. Double points for removal of lines of code this year. Everybody gets double points for those. That's awesome.
Walter, did you want to talk about your proposal?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know Nick and a few others have certainly looked through it. I tried to outline a lot of the issues that I think we're going to need to solve, and at least my take on the best way of solving them as a community on how to build cloud provider specific releases. I strongly recommend reading it. There are a lot of things in there that I think we need to think about, like how much code do we want to move into staging? How do we deal with migrations? How do we deal with doing just simple things like builds? Do we want to have a new build tag for Kubernetes to build a cloud provider agnostic version of the kernel? And by kernel, I mean things like the kubelet, the kube API server, and the kube controller manager. So I believe that's in last week's notes. I also had it on the Slack channel. So I strongly recommend everyone take a look at that. I don't think it's complete yet. And I would really love for people to think through some of these things. If you guys know Justin Santa Barbara, I had a meeting with him yesterday, and we just sat down for about half an hour and went over what problems we could expect to find migrating from, whether it's AWS or GCE, migrating from a release that doesn't have a CCM in it to a cloud provider specific release that does. And so, you know, things like if we have an HA, we've got this sort of 3-step upgrade where step 1 is you upgrade one of the masters of the 3 masters in an HA. And so now you have this interesting aspect where, thanks to leader election, you know you have an old KCM, you have a new CC that's a leader, you have a new CCM that's the leader, and you have old kubelets. And what does that mean? And we're all going to have to deal with this situation. So we really need to make sure that we've thought through everything. And in fact, I'm hoping to put out a fix pretty quickly that I had discussed with Andrew, which is, I think we have, before we even get to that point, the old release with the KCM, you need to be able to disable controllers, because obviously if we have old KCM and new CCM, both of them thinks they should be running things like the service and route controller. And so we need a way to be able to turn off the service and route controllers without actually going into external mode on the KCM. So we need to think through those, and I think there's a little bit of pre-work that we need to make sure gets done.
Like implement some sort of drain mechanism. So
that's another thought, yeah. So please take a look through that doc. Make sure that we've captured any odd edge cases or use cases that you realize we need to do.
Yeah. So to add to that, I think right now one of the few benefits of being completely out of tree is that you don't necessarily have to deal with that too much during upgrades.
Were you just saying, in fact, we don't all have to deal with that? Good luck with that? Is that what that was?
I'm just saying it's not as big of a problem for providers.
You in here just now. I'm gonna zip up.
But yeah, especially everyone should look at it for sure. But especially if you are an engineer for EKS or entry provider, this is going to definitely affect you a lot more than for me, for example. Not to say that I'm not going to look at it though. I will.
No. I also have had the thought that maybe SIG release could expand its scope and think through more of what are the combinations and how do we bundle things together. We have in the room right now Caleb Miles. Maybe Caleb has some thoughts on SIG release taking on more than the process, but also the mechanics of that.
Only if you've got some headcounts.
Headcount, yeah, sure. There's
Okay.
headcount. Look at all these people.
Yeah,
look at all these motivated people.
Yeah, for sure.
We're just smearing peanut butter at this point. So headcount is just what does someone not do, right?
Yeah, I guess we could talk. We should put an agenda item on the SIG release meeting and actually have one of the longer term.
It's about to get much more complicated, so it would be useful to have some at least eyes on it.
Yeah.
Okay. How was that, Andrew? Was that a good overview of Walter's doc for this discussion?
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. So anything else that anyone wanted to bring up? Otherwise, we can end early.
I like it. I think it's the first time in a long time.
All right, cool. All right, then see you, everyone.
Bye, gang.
Bye.
Please look at the proposal and the charter. Bye.